I'm Deliska McGee. Thank you for tuning in to the 2015 Old Stone Church Hope for the City Speaker Symposium. Now in its 7th year, this year's theme focuses on one of Northeast Ohio's greatest assets and one of our greatest needs, water. Our first speaker in the series is Dr. Robert Heath, an ecosystem ecologist and professor emeritus in the Department of Biological Sciences at Kent State University. Among a long list of accolades, Dr. Heath was instrumental in establishing the Water Resources Research Institute, a multidisciplinary consortium of faculty conducting research on problems of fresh water quality, abundance, and availability. In 2008, he was awarded the Ohio Lake Erie Award by the Ohio Lake Erie Commission for his dedication to the protection and restoration of Lake Erie. Dr. Heath was also the president of the International Association for Great Lakes Research and is currently a consultant to the Science Advisory Board of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the chairperson of Ohio's Department of Natural Resources Coastal Resources Advisory Council, and is on the board of directors of the Cleveland Water Alliance. In this presentation for Hope for the City, Dr. Heath raises the intriguing question: could Northeast Ohio run out of fresh water?
So what I want to do today is, newsflash. There's a newsflash. Well, we've got to take a look at this because we certainly don't want to miss any important news. Wow. This was about a year ago. Cleveland, Ohio was slated as one of the 11 American cities that may soon completely run out of drinking water. Well, that's cause for concern. The source is the Huffington Post, which I look at and listen to every now and then. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we could be in big trouble. Water is an absolutely irreplaceable natural resource. Unlike some other natural resources like wood or coal or gasoline, if you run out of those, you can switch to another natural resource and still get by. But not with water. Water is the only thing that can't be replaced, and people can only live 5 days while we can live for at least 5 weeks, sometimes much longer, without food. We can only live about 5 days without water. General water intake of water is about a gallon a day, but when you think about the quality of life, toilets, showers, clothes washing, food, depending on the food that you eat, maybe more or less water consumptive, gardening, recreation, we really account for, an average American accounts for over 100 gallons per day. So we cannot live without water in our lifestyle. In a city, talking about a city with hope, a city without water is indeed a city without hope. Cities and civilizations rise and fall based on their water resources. Often the reason a city is a city, for example, Cleveland, is because water is nearby. And when that changes, either because of droughts or frequent floods, or outgrowing the resource capacity, or due to water pollution, all of those things can then lead to the death of the city or of the civilization. If you'd like some examples, I'm going to try to introduce a number of themes, and I would hope that you would feel free to ask questions later on. This gives me the opportunity to move through a lot of material a lot faster. But the basic point here is that a city without water really is a city without hope. So we need to take this seriously. And it's for this reason that I put together this talk. Could Cleveland? Is this possible? I mean, just because it's printed, either electronically or otherwise, just because it's printed, it can raise the questions. Is this true? Is this something I need to pay attention to? Could Cleveland completely run out of drinking water? Well, let's look at water in the world. Where is the water? Most of it, of course, is salt water. Fresh water only accounts for 3% of the water in the world. Of the fresh water, most of that is as ice. 30% of it is groundwater, and only 0.3% of that is surface water. I really want to emphasize that. We often look at Lake Erie and we say, oh, it's 20% of the world's fresh water, which isn't right. It's 20% of the world's surface fresh water. Just go back to this one. Of the surface water, notice there's 100 times more water in the ground. Groundwater is the predominant source. And therefore, most drinking water facilities depend on groundwater as their water source. As I say, the Great Lakes have 20% of the surface fresh water. Wetlands have another 11%, and rivers another 2%. Well, let's look at the water cycle just quickly. I think everybody knows this from grade school, and probably you've seen it enough times that you feel comfortable forgetting it. But we have water evaporating, going into water vapor, forming clouds. The rain falls on the land, and then it either percolates into the ground or it runs off into surface water. So here we have a river, here we have a lake, here we have groundwater, and we have groundwater flowing from the ground, or groundwater exchanging with a river or with a lake. And so those are then the things. Remember, most of the water is in the ground, so most of the water facilities then are drilling wells into the groundwater supply. We can also drill wells into water supplies that are influenced by surface waters, or we can put water pipes directly into the surface waters and use those as drinking water sources. So when we are asking, oh, could you run out of drinking water, we really have to say, well, what's your source? And how safe is it? So we want to look at the various sources and ask how safe is it, and especially look at the source that Cleveland uses for its drinking water. Well, drinking water sources, as I just said, some people get it in pictures, other people get it in words. So one thing that I learned after 40 years of being a professor is you say it in words, you say it in pictures. Sometimes you say it in pictures first, then you say it in words. So this is what I'm doing. Now, the Huffington Post, when I read this, I thought, wow, Cleveland could soon run out of drinking water, completely run out of drinking water. Well, I'd like to know what they had on their mind. And so they talk about earlier in Cleveland's watershed that it was moderately stressed. And they're referring here to groundwater. Much of Ohio is at risk for water scarcity based on drought patterns. And so when they say much of Ohio, I think, okay, they're talking about groundwater. So what are the threats to groundwater? And many cities in Ohio, by far the majority of cities in Ohio, use groundwater as the water source, if only because the predominant source of water is groundwater. Well, first of all, the source could dry up. Groundwater needs to be replenished, and you do have groundwaters at different depths. Some of them are readily replenished. Others are not so readily replenished. For example, the Ogallala aquifer in the middle of the country, the aquifer that feeds all of the Great Plains, is not surface. It's not near the surface. It's actually fossil water, and therefore it is not replenished by water from the surface. And therefore, as it's being used, it's a large source of water. As it's being used, it's really being used up. And one of the concerns that we have, not only here in Cleveland, but elsewhere, is how can we use our resources sustainably? How can we use them without using them up? And so you can see the Oglala Reservoir or aquifer is really a source that is being used up, so much so that now farms in the Great Plains, the breadbasket of the United States, is now under threat because some of the farms are on water rationing. The farmer on the left side of the road can use water on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The farmer on the right side of the road, he's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you do have water rationing going on. So it is entirely conceivable a groundwater source could be used up, or population and uses could exceed the well capacity. Once again, something that is happening with a lot of well sources is because it's good water, it's plentiful, people come. And as they come, they can overwhelm the amount of water that can be drawn from that source. Or, of course, the source could become polluted. All of these things are things, if you want to ask later on, that's fine. I can give examples of each of these. But wait, this is the Ohio surface water map, and these little red dots here are the ones that use Lake Erie as its surface water source. Oh, wait a second. We don't mean this couldn't be. That the Huffington Post would make a big mistake like that, thinking that we're depending on groundwater and that groundwater is being stressed and so we could run out. We've got surface water. Cleveland's water is surface water. So what are the threats to surface water sources? Well, whether it's a river or a lake, it could dry up. The population could exceed the facility output, so you'd have to build another facility, or the source could become polluted. Lake Erie is Cleveland's water source, and so the questions that we have to ask then from these various threats are, could Lake Erie dry up? We're going through some global climate change, and we'll continue to go through it for the foreseeable future. Could Lake Erie dry up? Lakes do dry up. The Aral Sea at one time was the Aral Sea and now is several ponds. And so large bodies of water, yes, can dry up. Can the demand exceed the capacity of the drinking water? It could. This is an entirely legitimate question. Can the demand exceed the capacity to deliver useful, high-quality water? And is it polluted? What are the chances for pollution? Well, let's look at the Great Lakes. Let's see. Well, this one's Lake Superior. That's pretty nice and deep. Lots of water there. With a turnover time of about 600 years, meaning if you just stop putting any water in, it would take you 600 years to drain it dry. But of course, there's always water coming back in through rain and snow. Lake Huron in Michigan, technically one lake. One of the questions we ask students sometimes, trick question of course, is name the 5 Great Lakes. And we expect them to say Lake Michigan Huron is one lake, because indeed it has the same lake level and it's connected. It's just kind of a funny shape for a lake. Then you have Lake St. Clair, very shallow. Then you have Lake Erie. You have Lake Ontario, and then of course you have Niagara. You have Niagara Falls, Lake Ontario, and then you have the St. Lawrence Seaway. Wow. Look at Lake Erie. Of the 5 Great Lakes that we usually think of, we usually count Michigan and Huron as separate lakes. Of those, Lake Erie is really kind of a wide river connecting Huron and Ontario. The other lakes are very deep. So, wow, that looks like it could be vulnerable to drying. really worry about that. Is that a legitimate worry? Well, let's see. The main source of what controls Lake Erie's water level really is largely the snowfall in the Lake Superior watershed. So what affects the snowfall in the Lake Superior watershed is the predominant predictive factor of what will happen to Lake Erie's water levels. And Lake Superior was encountering about a 20-year snow drought. It appears to be ending now. But during that time, Lake Superior's water level dropped. There is just one problem there. You have a lot of commerce. And so the Army Corps prevented and controlled the amount of flow that could leave through the Sault Ste. Marie locks, because they had to keep the water level up sufficient to get the Lakers and Salties, the steamers for commercial trade, to get them through those locks. And so by constraining the water flow from Lake Superior, it affected the downstream lakes, predominantly Lake Erie, because we're the shallowest. Lake Erie is the shallowest of the Great Lakes, but that means it's also the warmest, and that means it's also the most productive. Lake Erie produces more fish than the rest of the Great Lakes combined. And it's the largest freshwater fishery in the world, largely used as a commercial fishery by our good friends to the north. It's used as a recreational fishery south of the border, but as a major commercial fishery north of the border, and is the largest freshwater fishery in the world. So we don't want to see that dry up. What do the climate change models say? Well, climate change models, where it is true, we don't know everything, but that isn't to say we don't know anything. And the models are predicting fairly accurately what's happening. So let's at least take this seriously enough to see, well, what do they predict? Now, when you look at this graph, you think, oh my God, this is terrible. And then you look at the prediction here. This is in feet, so what it's predicting is Lake Erie may decline by the end of this century by perhaps 1.5 feet. Well, it's a lot deeper than that. What that's saying, I mean, okay, now let's say, okay, those are the data. Now what do they mean? And what they mean is Lake Erie's not going to dry up. So okay, we took, yeah, I heard someone say, whew. Yeah, that's a big whew. So, okay, Lake Erie's not going to dry up. Okay, well, what about the demand? Could demand exceed capacity in Cleveland? Well, Cleveland, the drinking water facilities are now running at only about 38% capacity. That is to say, they have a large excess capacity. Cleveland could double in size before, double in water demand before there would be any need to even think about increasing our capacity to deliver water. So the answer to that, could demand exceed capacity in the foreseeable future? And the answer to that is no. Okay, well, what about pollution? Well, this is one that we are concerned about. And it's one of the things that I do in my research, and it's one of the things that I do in my consulting of the US EPA and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. This is a picture with accurate color. This is this pea soup green lake. This is in the Western Basin, and we all know the Western Basin, because it's very shallow and very warm and has a lot of nutrient inputs, it really stimulates the growth of these hazardous algal blooms. And if you want to get up close and see just what is that, that's microcystis. So this is a bloom of microcystis where you're seeing seeing it in the large. This is microcystis seen in a microscope. And this, so these are the cells. I think oh, there we go. These are the cells. Each one of those is a cell, and they clump together into these large globs, and they produce this toxin called microcystin. So it's a little bit confusing at times. The name of the organism is microcystis. The name of the toxin is microcystin. There are also other toxins and other microbial hazards in the lake that the Cleveland drinking water facility filters out. So once again, they watch very closely for this toxin, and they have excess capacity to remove it to World Health Organization standards and below. So, but this was the toxin that caused the shutdown of the city of Toledo's drinking water last August. I think it was last August 1st through the 4th. Toledo is a great place to visit, but you can't drink the water at all. And the amount of microcystin in the lake water was so high you really had to avoid contact. It was not one of the times that you would want to jump in the water and take a swim. So microcystin is a hazardous hepatotoxin. That's science for it'll hurt your liver. And this is it. So this is removed through the use of activated carbon. And so in polishing the water, is when the microcystin is in the water is polished to remove organic compounds such as microcystin. So Lake Erie, Lake Erie is Cleveland's water source. Could it dry up? No. See, capacity? No. Can it be polluted? It could be, but the drinking water facilities are sufficient to remove that. Nevertheless, notice one of the things I try to teach my students is, well, the answers are answers and they come and go. Sometimes the questions are more important than the answers because they all stay around. So we do have to continue to ask, especially this last one, is what about pollution of the lake? We need to be vigilant to make sure that pollutants, either microbial pollutants such as Giardia and Cryptosporidium, which are microorganisms that have caused major epidemics in cities. Up in Milwaukee, they had a Cryptosporidium infestation about 20 years ago, which caused major problems. So these are problems that we have to be continually mindful of. But the good news is that Lake Erie is in good shape. Now, remember, I said you've got to say it in words for some people, you've got to say it in pictures for others. So here's the picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of Cleveland. That's Cleveland. This is taken from a research vessel. This is the Lake Guardian, U.S. Coast Guard vessel, Lake Guardian. And it's one that I did a fair amount of my research on. When we go out to look at a freshwater inland sea, we go out, we do Lake Erie in about 4 days. To do Lake Superior, it would take us about 2 weeks. We would be out to sea, often out of the sight of land for over a week. So these are big bodies of water, and I love this picture because, look, it shows there's Cleveland, and here is its plentiful water source.
How far out is
That
that?
would be about 5 miles out. Yeah. But wait, there's more. Suppose, just suppose, this is the boundary, this is the watershed boundary, where you see the dotted lines there. That's the watershed boundary of the Great Lakes watershed. But suppose instead it's the national boundary. Suppose it's the national boundary of a new of a new nation. Let's call it Great Lakes-landia. Great Lakes-landia has a lot of commerce in it. These are major commercial centers, major economic centers. So if you were someone looking around saying, well, okay, I know that we're undergoing climate change. I know some places that are dry now will get drier. And some places that have problems with flooding will get floodier. I want to go to a place, I want to set up a major industry. I depend on water. I want to set up a major industry someplace that will be relatively unaffected. Every place on the globe will be affected by global climate change. But some places will be more affected than others. I want to go to a place that's relatively unaffected. But I don't want it to be Outer Mongolia. I mean, if you say, well, the best place to go would be Outer Mongolia, that wouldn't make sense because there isn't a commercial economic base for that. So I want to go someplace where there is a strong economic base. This is where you would go. You would go to Great Lakes-landia. How does the commercial base in this compare with commercial bases elsewhere? The Brookings Institute estimated that if this were a country, it would be the 7th largest economy in the world. So that means that Cleveland is a city of hope. It's hope for the present because we have plenty of water and it's not going away. We can handle it. We have high capacity. Better than that, it's hope for the foreseeable future. Cleveland will not only exist, it will be the attractive, this area, Great Lakes-landia, will be the growth spot not only of the nation, of these two nations, it'll be the growth spot of the world, I firmly believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. We pray that this presentation from the Old Stone Church expands your thinking and deepens your commitment for water care and stewardship of the earth. We invite you to the Old Stone Church in the heart of Greater Cleveland to join us in our mission to love Christ and serve City spiritually, socially, and culturally. May God bless you now and always.